السلام عليكم ورحمة الله نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قال الله تعالى في شان حبيبه إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد صلاة تنجينا بها من جميع الأحوال والآفات وتقضي لنا بها جميع الحاجات وتطهرنا بها من جميع السيئات وترفعنا بها عندك على الدرجات وتبلغنا بها أقصى الغايات من جميع الخيرات في الحياة وبعد الممات إنك على كل شيء قدير. صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. Today is the 21st of Rajab, and as we mentioned before, this is also the month of the ascension or the night journey of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which according to most scholars took place on the 27th night of this month. So inshallah the intention is today and next Friday also to talk a little bit about the Meraj of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Before I say a few things about the journey itself, it's important when you look at anything to understand the background to whatever you're looking at, so that it makes it easier to understand the specifics of what you want to know. And it's also important never to lose sight of the basics. And so, when we look at the backdrop to this journey, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he starts preaching, and as we all know, before he starts, before the declaration of prophethood, Quraysh had no problems with him. Quraysh were happy with him. They are the ones who gave him the title of Sadiq al-Amin. When the Kaaba was being rebuilt and it came time for the black stone to be placed and the war, we know that there was going to be fighting amongst them. And they said, we'll leave it to whoever comes the next morning. So they were all very happy when they realized that the one who came was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they had no issues with him at that point. All of the issues came when he declares his prophethood and he tells them, to stop worshiping all these idols and to worship Allah alone. This is when all of the issues came up. Now they try to backtrack as to, well, we're the ones who said he's Sadiq al-Amin. How can we now, claim that he's something else? But as soon as he makes this declaration, Quraysh understood that to accept him, because before this point it was simply he was just another person. For them, in their eyes, he was just another person. He was another decent person. But now they understood that with him being Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they had to humble themselves before him and acknowledge him as better than themselves. This is where the issue came. Because amongst them before was Zayd bin Nawfal radiallahu anhu. If you know his history, he is the father of Sa'id bin bin Zayd, who was one of the Ashara Mubashara. He passed away before the declaration of prophethood. But the reason I say radiallahu anhu, he was there, and he also didn't worship any of the idols. He worshipped Allah alone. He was very adherent to the original religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam. He would take care of, he would take these baby girls that were going to be buried alive away from their parents and raise them himself, and then get them married. He would not eat any meat that was sacrificed to any of the idols. And he's the one who told his son that, look, this prophet that has been promised is about to come. And when he says, he says, I have not been able to see him, because he's on his deathbed at this moment. He says, I will not be able to see him, but you may be able to see him. And if he comes in your time, do not hesitate in accepting him. So he was there. But the reaction to him was not the same as their reaction to Rasulullah. Because for them, he was simply another person who didn't agree with them. But again, when time for Rasulullah came, they understood that to accept him means to accept that he is better than us. He is not like us. This is where the issue came. This is the whole issue. And so we see their reaction. They wanted to kill him, but they couldn't because of his protection from Banu Hashim. They knew that to kill him would mean war, which they didn't want. So what do? They torture those who accept him. Some of them severely. We know, everybody knows about Bilal, radiallahu anhu, dragging him through the streets, placing large stone on his chest in the hot desert sun. Another one of the companions, Khabbab, they would lay him on the coals, and the fat dripping from his back would put out the fire. This is the torture that did it, simply for accepting a Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That was it. That was their only crime. And we know that things got bad enough to where some of the people he sent to Abyssinia, to Najashi, for protection. And as all of this is going on, he had two major protectors in society, two major backers in society. One within the house, which was his wife, Bibi Khadija, radiallahu anha, and the other one outside of the house, which was his uncle, Hazrat Abu Talib, radiallahu anha. Seventh year of the mission, we know that this is when they drew up the contract to boycott Banu Hashim and Banu Muttalib, anyone who supports them. This is very interesting, because if you look at the boycott, it was not the boycott of the Muslims. Because you had Muslims from Banu Adi, Muslims from Banu Makhzum, Muslims from various other clans, from Banu Umayyah, various other clans from Quraysh. They didn't say we're boycotting the Muslims. They said we're boycotting Banu Hashim until they hand him over to us. To do with him whatever we please. This was the boycott. If you look at most of the people that were involved in the boycott, that were being boycotted, they had not accepted Islam at this point. Yet the two cousin clans, Banu Hashim and Banu Muttalib, most of them were not Muslim, with the exception of a handful of them. Most of them were not. Abu Lahab, who technically was from Banu Hashim, of course, he had married into Banu Umayyah, and when the boycott time came, he separated himself from Banu Hashim. So he's not in the boycott. So this boycott goes on for, what, 3 years. No one is to have any relations with them. No one is to trade with them. No one is to do anything with them. And they are to be isolated within the small area. You would occasionally have people who would sneak in food. Otherwise, they were chewing leather just to have the sensation of trying to eat something. Eating leaves, whatever they could get. So this goes on for 3 years. Literal starvation. At the end of those 3 years, which is the 10th year of the mission, the agreement that they had drafted, every piece of that agreement was eaten up by termites, with the exception of the name of Allah. They had 2 copies of this. One they had hung on the Kaaba, and the other one Abu Jahl had kept secret, safe. Rasulullah SAW makes the announcement that this boycott's over because the agreement, is finished. His uncle, Hazrat Abu Talib, immediately runs out and makes the announcement. He hasn't even seen it. But this is his connection with his nephew, who is Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when he makes the announcement, the other Quraysh leaders, they say, what are you doing? What's your proof? So when they opened the Kaaba and they looked inside of the Kaaba, exactly as Rasulullah had described it, it had been eaten by the termites. Abu Jahl says, I've got a copy. I've got a backup. When he opens his, whatever container he had kept it in, same exact thing. It had also been eaten by the termites, with the exception of the name of Allah. Normally I would say you can imagine, but we can't imagine. 3 years of starvation, what it does to someone. And so these 2 supporters, if you look at their history, Bibi Khadija radiallahu anha, and actually both of them are mentioned in Surah Wad-Duha. Alam yajidka yatiman fa'awa. This is who? In whose house did, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we found you orphaned and we gave you refuge. In whose house was he given refuge? In the house of his uncle, Hazrat Abu Talib. So the action of Hazrat Abu Talib, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to it as his own action, because he says, we found you orphaned and we gave you refuge. And then, وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى, that we found you restricted of means and we made you wealthy. Whose wealth? The wealth of Bibi Khadija radiallahu anha. If you look at her status amongst Quraysh before Islam, she was already known as Tahira, the pure one. She was not like the other women. But she was also, if you look at her from a worldly standpoint, she was the richest person in Arabia, period. And what does she do with this wealth? She gives it to her husband, Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But people don't know how she gave it to him. The assumption is, he married her and she was wealthy, so her wealth became his wealth. No. Not long after the declaration of prophethood, one day Rasulullah ﷺ comes to the house, back to the house, upset. And she realizes that he's upset. So she asks him, she says, what happened? So he says that there were some poor people who needed some money, and I wanted to give them the money, but then I thought that if I give them the money, the people will say, oh, he's spending the money of his wife. There's always some excuse. Oh, he's this way because of this. So she goes to Zayd bin Haritha and says, go and invite all of them, all the bigwigs of Quraysh. All of them owed her, because most of their sons became rich because of her. Because there was, whenever she would send a caravan, they would tie their wealth with hers. And her caravans were very successful, so they would also be successful. So now, when Zayd, he goes and invites them all, Abu Jahl, Umayyah bin Khalaf, Utbah bin Rabi, Shayba bin Rabi, Abu Lahab, all of them. Abu Bakr is the neighbor. He was also there, and he's actually the reporter of this event. So then, when they all arrive, they're all sitting around. She's invited them, so no one's going to deny her. So then she tells Zayd to go and bring the money. And he goes in the other room and brings a box of dinar. Not dirham. Dirham is the silver coin, the dinar, the gold coins. And pours them in the middle. Everyone's sitting around, and sheet in between, and he pours it in that. And then he goes in and gets another box and pours that, and then he gets another box and another box, until Abu Bakr says that the person sitting on this side couldn't see the person sitting on that side. And then she takes her jewelry off and puts it in the pile. And she said that everybody should understand that none of this wealth is mine, and all of this wealth is Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to do with whatever he pleases. She, of course, as we know, was 15 years older than him. So by the end of the boycott, she's 65 years old. The uncle is also much older, so he's somewhere around 70-ish. Younger person can handle starvation to some extent. As you get older, your body can't handle things as well. The immune system goes down, everything goes down. We know this. So after the boycott, not long after the boycott is lifted, she passes away. There is a difference of opinion who went first, but everybody agrees that it was within days of each other, within 2 weeks of each other. So she passes away, and then within a couple of weeks, he passes away. Whenever Quraysh, and the media of Quraysh was what? It was the poetry. It was the media of the time. The first person to recite poetry in honor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his uncle Hazrat Abu Talib. They would do poetry against him, and he would respond to their poetry. We all know about Hassan bin Thabit radiallahu anhu, the poet of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he wasn't the poet of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam until Medina Munawwara. In Makkah, the one who took care of all of this, defending the honor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was his uncle Hazrat Abu Talib. So the two people who were his strongest supporters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls them back within weeks of each other. But the other important point to understand here, when you're in a foreign land and things are very harsh, the people there reject you. The people who supported you are now gone. You yearn to go back home. That's the natural yearning. Because there are those who say that the Meraj, or this journey, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was saddened because no one was accepting Islam, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called him back for this journey. Sort of like saying that, your child is sad because you didn't give him ice, or he didn't get ice cream, so you give him bread. If that was the situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have simply give everybody hidayah. That would have solved the problem. Yeah, he was saddened. He was always saddened because the people didn't accept guidance and because he knew what was to come for them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in the Quran as well, that was not the purpose of the journey. Again, when you're in a foreign land, and of course, this is foreign land for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We have not sent you except as a mercy to all of creation. Alam, it's defined as world, but alam is anything other than Allah. It is the creation. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is rahmat to all of creation. Just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Rabbul Alameen, so wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Rabb, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is rahmah. But this verse also tells us so many other things. It says, we did not send you except as a mercy to all of creation. Which means that he is not like the rest of creation, and he was not within the rest of creation. He is creation, but he is very different. It's like if I have a box in this room, and I move the box from here to there, I can't say that I sent the box to the room. The box was already in the room. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that I sent you to all of creation, which tells us also that he is before all the rest of creation. This gets to the hadith which is in Musannaf Abdul Razak. And Abdul Razak is the teacher of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, who is the teacher of Imam Bukhari. So he is the grand teacher of Imam Bukhari. And this is where Hazrat Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what was the first creation? And he says what? He says, Nur Nabiyaka, the Nur of your Nabi. And then the hadith goes on, but just understand this point, the Nur of your Nabi. So the question now is, where was that Nur? Because if he is the first creation, place and time and everything else is the creation of Allah. So he was created before place. He was created before time. He is created before all of everything else. So where is he? Or rather, where was he? What is home for him? We know that the first home of mankind is Jannah. This is why, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates Adam alayhi salam, where does he place him? In Jannah. He is created within Jannah. That is his first home. This is why, intuitively, our yearning is to go to Jannah, because that is our home. But Rasulullah was created before Jannah, because Jannah is also creation. It is also a place. So what is his home? And the only thing we can say is that it is the presence of Allah, whatever that means. We have no understanding of that. Just like when Rasulullah is telling the companions about this journey, and he talks about going from place to place to place to place. He went from Makkah to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to the first heaven, from the first heaven to the next, and then the next, and then the next. But then in the end, what does he say? He says, La Makkah. What does La Makkah mean? No place. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be confined to a place. There is no coming and going and here and there for Allah. Allah is. So this journey is because he feels homesick. And the interesting thing is that when he's called for the journey, the invitation comes. We invite somebody, we send them a letter, we call them on the phone, text them. These days, it used to be you'd have somebody go and take the letter and invite them, and now it's, you just text them. And then in there, RSVP, respond, please. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he requests the audience of his Habib, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he simply doesn't send an invitation. He sends the limousine as well as the chauffeur. Buraq, that is the limousine. And Jibreel al-Islam is the chauffeur. People think, oh, he was the guide. He's not the guide. If he was the guide doesn't leave you at the main part of the journey. At the most important part of the journey, the guide doesn't leave you. When they get to Sidratul Muntaha, what does Jibreel al-Islam do? He says, I can't go any further. He was simply along for the ride. Company for the journey, for the first part of the journey. And there's so many things we have to say these days because people's minds are so, messed up. When we accept Rasulullah as Rasulullah, he is khayr khalqillah, period. There is nothing even close to him in creation. My father was in Atlanta when one of the masajid in Atlanta, and he was talking to one of the doctors there, who was also on the board and all these other things. And, this modern day mentality. So my father simply asked him a question, very simple, basic question. He asked him, he says, who is khayr khalqillah? This is a question that every Muslim child, or rather every Muslim, from the time he can speak until the time, he can't speak anymore, should have the answer to. Without even thinking. So this, Dr. Saab, who's supposed to be learned and supposed to know the deen as well, he starts thinking. He's thinking. And after thinking for, about 5 minutes, my dad gave him time. He says, who is it? It wasn't like a quick response. He's thinking and he's thinking. And then he says, Jibreel. That is Islam. So my father said, what can I say to you? What can you say to someone like that? Rasulullah is khayr khalqillah, period, in everything. And for someone whose mind is drifting in the wrong direction, everything, when you say khayr means good. Period. He is the best in everything. And there is no comparison with him in any of creation. Time's up. Inshallah, we'll actually start covering the journey next week, inshallah. As I said earlier, if you know the basics, then everything else falls into place. And that goes for everything. in every field. You know, if someone knows the basics and knows how to put the basics together, everything else becomes easy. And the basis of Islam is the love of Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, that's it. That is the essence of Iman. And to love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam above everything else. And we know this. We say this. But then when it comes time to apply it, then I don't know where we go. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us, and may He fill our hearts with His true love and the true love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom they love, and may He protect and give victory to our brothers and sisters in Palestine, and may He make, you know, those that are being oppressed, may He give them victory, and those that are the oppressors, may He remove them. Those who have not made sunnah, go ahead and make sunnah, inshallah.